This is the Family Building Podcast. I'm your host, Attorney Ted Yeomans. We hope that the story that you're about to hear will encourage you to engage in the journey called adoption. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the Family Building Podcast. I'm going to tell you today about our own personal adoption story. It's an adoption story that has really transformed my heart and transformed me as an adoption attorney. My wife Cheryl and I have been blessed with 6 amazing kids, but one of those children came to us via adoption. Back in 1991, Cheryl and I had our 3rd child together, and we got very alarming news that her uncle Ray had rolled the vehicle with his wife and our 2 cousins, Ryan and Chaz, in the back seat of the car, that everyone was fine except that Uncle Ray was killed on impact. He was trying to avoid an oncoming car and swerved, and when he overcorrected, he rolled the vehicle. That image is just seared in my mind, that in that very moment, there was a plan to really devastate that family, to devastate each one of those children, devastate Aunt Mary. To say the least, shock and awe and surprise. It was interesting. Cheryl and I were, so kind of engulfed and immersed in our own family, responsibilities and trying to get the bills paid. And I'm a new lawyer. I'm running from courtroom to courtroom, litigating cases. We never considered the impact that it was going to have on our lives. So we advance forward now. Ryann, our daughter, at that time was about 2.5 years old. And unfortunately, it breaks my heart that she really never knew the voice of her father, our Uncle Ray. But as time progressed, we moved closer to Aunt Mary and the cousins, our cousins, to our kids, the second cousins, and they began to organically get involved. It's interesting, the Bible calls us to the fatherless. And here Chaz and Ryan were fatherless. Aunt Mary was a widow. And my wife, who was already really kind of stretched at the max, always finds this capacity, she's amazing, to love more, to take more in, to take on more responsibility. So she organically began to kind of be a second mom to Ryan, taking them after school with our children to gymnastics and this activity and that activity. And then Aunt Mary would pick them up after she got off work, of course, single income, single mother. And, she was devastated at the loss of her husband. He was an amazing man. And so for the next 9 years or so, this was the cadence in our lives, in my wife's life. I was always working. But then suddenly in the late 90s, Aunt Mary came down with chest pains and shockingly was not supposed to be a life-threatening situation, but Aunt Mary ends up passing away from a heart failure. So we have 2 orphans. We're obviously called to orphans, to widows, to the fatherless. Unbeknownst to us, Ryan was getting closer and closer to our family. She initially, from my perspective, and I want to say this testimony is really from my perspective. You're going to one day hear from the other members of the family regarding their perspective of this. But little by little, she was getting closer and closer to us. Well, Aunt Mary had put together a will that said that Ryan and her smaller brother, her little brother, would go with a caregiver who would become her legal guardian. And we didn't want to fight Aunt Mary's will. And however, after about 3 years, Ryan just was not content. That was really not working for the guardian and for Ryan. And she called us, pleading with us to take her in. I remember in that moment, and this is where it's transformed me as an adoption lawyer, I had every excuse to not take Ryan in. Do we have space? We really didn't have an extra bedroom. We could kind of stack the kids up, if you will. But our daughter Whitney, she can stay in my room. She loved her. They had become like sisters, which was really a sweet relationship as I observed it. And so that excuse was gone. Well, what about finances? Well, there's some funding. There was a little bit of life insurance. Like, money's never the excuse. Children and money don't mix. And that again really started to change my heart. Could my wife and I handle it relationally? Could we handle it emotionally? Would it be too much for, the kids? How does it change the dynamic? We now have, 5 children, and now there's going to be a 6th or a 5th at that time. And so all these questions go through my mind. But you have this orphan, and I don't call Ryan an orphan, but you had an orphan crying out like, I want to be part of your family. And how do you say no to that? So my attitude, I just kind of prayed about it, and I would say within 2 hours, my attitude was better. And I remember saying to Ryan, I'm not going to fight your guardian. I want her to see your heart. I want her to see our heart to receive you, and I want her to give. That principle has shaped, again, us as practicing lawyers. When we get into the litigation cases, we want the parent to give. We don't want to get man's justice and a judge to terminate their rights. We want them to give. And so it's a better way to do it. Consented to adoption is a much better, or guardianship. So the caregiver, the guardian, finally gave in and said, if Ryan wants to go there and you guys are willing to take her, she can move in with you. I remember the day that changed one of the most profound experiences in my life was the day that Ryan was coming from another Southern California town, 2 towns over. My wife went to pick her up, gathering, what little belongings she had, and she was coming to our house. I was out mowing the back lawn and figuring we'd have kind of a welcome home party, kind of a barbecue, have a few of the family members over. So I'm just cleaning up the backyard and I'm mowing, and I've got these sunglasses on just for eye protection. And I'm going to explain it like the only way I can explain it. It was an open heaven experience, and I felt God just give me his heart for the orphans, which again, that moment changed me forever, and changed me as an advocate, changed me as a lawyer, changed me as a father. And I'm mowing the lawn and I am literally bawling. I'm almost uncontrollably bawling, and having this moment that every time I speak about it, I get emotional because God's heart for the orphan is so, so strong. And I think this experience has given me what I hope you as the audience would understand. From Ryan's standpoint, wouldn't you want this family that is saying we're willing to take you in? Wouldn't you want them to step up? Wouldn't you want them to take you in? These children who are languishing in foster care, these kids who are in abusive homes, they're crying out. This voice of the orphan crying out, would someone please stand in the gap for me? Would someone please come and rescue me? And although Ryan wasn't saying that, that's what she needed. And, I wasn't doing her a favor. She's ultimately done me a favor. The way God's orchestrated this, he's changed my heart. And I remember when she arrived, I still had barely gathered myself, and I took my sunglasses off, and I went up and I hugged her, and I just said, through a very broken voice, I just said, welcome home. And she was 14 at that time. And as I perceive, very sad. And, she had lost her parents. She had no family left. And so we were starting a brand new adventure together. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but I go through the next 10 years. But it was not until she was 24 years old and in college, just graduating from college, that we actually adopted her. And we adopted her as an adult. And I just little shout out for adult adoption. It's one of the most amazing things that we do, amazing types of adoption, because it's an adult saying to another adult. It's not a newborn child saying, hey, would you adopt me? Of course, those are sweet and amazing stories that we love, but it's an adult saying, I want you to be my covering. I want you to be my dad, my father. I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you to give me away. I want you to grandparent my children one day, and even great-grandparent to my grandchildren. So there is a volitional or a voluntary, a conscious decision to be covered by another human being. And that's what makes them so sweet. But, Ryann was 24 years old at the time. And I had seen her as my daughter from the time that she came in that very day. I would say the spirit of adoption touched my heart. I was never going to leave her. I was never going to forsake her. She was ours. And so I remember Ryann approaching us and saying, I really want to be adopted. And I think that it took some years for her to receive her adoption, as well as everyone to just settle in with that, like, you're my sister, legally, you're my sister. But when she mentioned it, I remember saying to her, Ryann, I don't need to adopt you. You've always been my daughter since the day you came here. But if it's something that you need and something that completes you, and if I didn't say that to her exactly, that was my heart, then absolutely. And adult adoption is great because there's no state intervention. There's really not much of any kind of investigation. There's no home study. There's not a lot of fees. In California, it's a $20 filing fee. You put the petition and the agreement together and you set a final hearing date. So she also said, I want the name Yeomans. And that kind of really startled me. I thought, wow, not only does she need to know legally she's our daughter, but she actually wants to take our name. And it's very interesting. Just, I'm a Christian, and as a Christian, I was adopted as a son, and I become a son of God. Like, what does that really mean? But when we were adopted, when we became Christians, it's a spiritual adoption. Our name changes to the beloved. We kind of lose all identity with our generational line and biological, generational and biological inheritances, because we have a new inheritance. We have a new family. We have a new name, and we have a new identity. And so that has really, that moment really kind of rhetorically asked me, and in my own heart, like, Ted, are you finally adopted in your own faith? But it was so important to Ryann to have that identity. And it really wasn't a pride in the name Yeomans, but I thought, boy, if that completes her, then gosh, we'll do it in a heartbeat. So we set that matter, and it was really a fun day. We treated it as a ceremony. We advise our clients, really make it ceremonial, make it special. And it was Thanksgiving morning, and we had set up a card and a bouquet of flowers for Ryann outside on the front doorstep. And we had a big balloon that said, "It's a girl." And we, Cheryl, my wife, and I had written her a nice note, tell her we love her and we look forward to this day. And I had my cell phone hidden in the flower bed. So it was recording all this. We had our son knock on the front door. He ran away. My wife said, "Ryann, could you go get the door?" And she insisted, "Ryann, go get the door." So Ryann kind of, walked to the front door thinking, why is she making me get the front door? And opened up and saw the balloon. We have it videoed. And she was a little bit perplexed, but when she came back in, we had assembled all of our adult children, and we had signature lines on the adult adoption agreement, and they each said to Ryann, like, "I want you to be my sister legally." And so it was, there were some tears that morning, on that Thanksgiving morning, but it was a beautiful ceremony. Of course, we went to court, we finalized it. It was a wonderful experience, but I want to just say adoption is so much deeper than going to court and getting a piece of paper. It literally changes the generational trajectory. And I remember one morning, I was just up in my quiet time. I was journaling in the morning early, and Ryann had left the house and, not said good morning to me. And I remember feeling like, gosh, why didn't she say good morning to me? And I remember just wrestling in my heart, like, as we were just getting to, become a family. I remember and writing it down in my journal saying, today I am, making a covenant that I will walk her down the aisle. I will love her all the days that I have breath in my lungs, and I will grandparent her grandchildren. And you blink your eye, and I did get to walk her down the aisle. And I do get to be a grandfather to her 2 children. And it is such a blessing. It is so amazing. But what's more amazing is what we're seeing Ryann come in to be. She's just this beautiful young woman. And it's interesting, if you were to call Family Building today, it would be Ryann who would answer the phone. So Ryann is running our back office. And to be honest, she's really kind of the heart and soul, or a major motivation for why we do what we do. And I've told that story and this story hundreds of times to hundreds of clients over the years, and Ryann knows I always tell the story. I hope that she perceives the same thing. I know that it's been a different journey for her, but I hope that she understands how much we love her and how much we love her every day that passes. We love her more and more. So my question to you, and my question throughout this podcast is, would you do that? Would you be vulnerable and put yourself in my position? What if a relative, what if a neighbor, what if a friend's daughter all of a sudden became orphaned? She lost her parents. And we've had a number of these cases over the years where parents die suddenly in an auto accident and a relative comes in and says, what do we do? So I want you to consider adoption. I would like you to encourage others to consider adoption, because there are children everywhere around us in our sphere of influence who need a family. So take care. That's our story. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.